Let me introduce our next speaker, Mr. Nimesh Chandhan. Am I audible? Hello?
Definitely, yes. Definitely.
Yeah. Who's going to speak on mind and the money? He is head investment equity at Canara Robeco Asset Management. In his role, he heads and overlooks the strategy for both domestic and offshore equity funds. Mr. Nimesh has more than 21 years of experience in the Indian capital market, of which 16 years has been in fund management. Under his leadership, Canara Robeco Asset Management Fund was awarded the best equity fund house by Morningstar in March 2021. He completed his master's in management in 2000 and then specialization in finance. He has also worked with ICICI Prudential Technology Fund, which won the ICRA Award in 2006 for best performance in 1 year period for a sector fund. In 2007, he received the ICICI Group Leadership Award for leadership in organization capacity. Over to you, Nimesh, sir.
Hi, good morning, and very happy to be here among all of you on this day. I just heard Ms. Geeta Tolia talking about the structuring of the businesses and what is most effective, and I think
Nimesh sir, we can barely hear you.
Is this better?
This is much
Should I keep the mic close to my mouth? Okay. All right. So I was saying that very happy to be in this seminar, and I just heard the previous session by Ms. Geeta Tolia, and even I found a few very interesting points to learn from that seminar. So I'll just upload my presentation. I have some few slides about investing that I've prepared for you. Are you able to see that screen now?
Yes.
All right. Fine. So actually, I'll be talking about investing, but talking less about markets and talking more about how to be a good investor or how to have success in investing. So this is a series of presentations I generally do called The Money and the Mind, which is talking about psychology behind investing and how temperament in investing and behavior in investing is more important than just gathering knowledge about various assets or securities. So the idea is to take you through quickly 3 short stories and 1 long story and 1 idea. So you can take this idea as a suggestion, or you can take this idea as what is a recommendation from my side. So let me take you through quickly. The picture that you see on the screen right now is a lady named Grace Groner. She was born in 1909, April 1909 to be specific. She started looking out for work in US during the Great Depression in the 1929-1930. She found a job as a secretary with a pharma company, and she worked for 43 years as a secretary in this company. She did not get married, did not have any kids. She didn't even buy a car. In fact, she used to live in an area. So the town was Lake Forest Town. But the area she used to live in was not a very posh area or where rich people stay. She lived a very normal and uneventful life. She used to do some charity for her school and for the children. She lived up to the age of 100. So she passed away in the year 2010, not very far away. She had written in her will that whatever assets she has, they be given to her school, Lake Forest Academy, to help give scholarship to students. When the principal, the dean of that school, received the check was for an amount more than $7 million, more than 50 crores. Now people started inquiring, how come this lady who's been just a secretary for so many years, how did she have so much wealth? So it seems she had invested $180 in stocks in equity markets in the year 1935. And whatever dividend she got or some bonuses she got, she reinvested back into the market. And that amount actually grew to $7 million. Now, this lady, as I described her life, you would know that she was not some super intelligent human being who created wealth from the markets, right? And here we find in the stock markets a lot of people who are born with a silver spoon, having the best of education, solving the best of complex problems in mathematics or accounting, but they are not able to create wealth. And in fact, during every crisis, they probably raise their hand and say that I'm bankrupt. So it is not the intelligence by which your mathematical prowess, by which you make money in the markets. To enjoy the magic of long-term compounding, you have to be a long-term investor in the market. And that's what will create wealth for you over a period of time. The second story is about a 25-year-old boy. So in 1952, a boy named Harry Markowitz, he was doing his study in linear programming, and he wanted to meet his professor to ask him what PhD topic should he pursue, what should be the doctoral topic for him. While he was waiting in the waiting room to meet his professor, he also met a stockbroker there who was also waiting. The stockbroker suggested to him, why don't you try putting this quantitative science into stock markets? The boy was very excited. He said, fine, I'll try that. He did not have any knowledge about the markets. So he said, okay, what is the good thing about the market? You get profits, you make returns on stocks. What is the undesirable thing? So he couldn't find what is the risk. So he put volatility as a risk. So returns are rewards and volatility is the risk. And then he wrote a nice paper on it, which after a few years actually got him a Nobel Prize. So Harry Markowitz, a lot of you may know, won the Nobel Prize for his paper on measuring risk and returns. Now, this topic of volatility was taken by other academicians and then put into various type of different academic studies about the stock markets. So volatility started being considered and put in textbooks as risk. On the other side, in 1954, Benjamin Graham, who's a guru of Warren Buffett, he wrote the book Intelligent Investor, which is considered to be a Bible kind of book for many fundamental investors. In that book, he mentioned that think of volatility as a guy named Mr. Market. Suppose you have a business and you have a partnership where Mr. Market is your partner. Now, Mr. Market has a tendency every day, he will come to your cabin and he will quote a price for that business. He will say, okay, I'm ready to buy your share in this business at X price. And I'm ready to sell you my stake in that business in that price. Will you buy or no? Or will you sell or no? Every day he comes and talks to you like this. Some days he is in a very good mood and offers you extremely high price. Some days he is very depressed and is willing to sell you his stake at a very low price. This is volatility or daily market fluctuations. Only when Mr. Market or market volatility is quoting an extremely high price for your investments and willing to buy it, or quoting an extremely low price for your investment and willing to sell it, only then as an investor one should react. Now, the investors who followed Benjamin Graham, guys like Warren Buffett, Seth Klarman, Howard Marks, all these investors, they made huge money. Now tell me whether volatility for a long-term investor, is it a risk? No. Volatility is a long-term investor's friend. That's when you can buy extremely good companies at fantastic prices. Now, let me come to the third story. A group of scientists under a guy named Paul Schlovick, they got together a few experts of horse racing, and they are called horse racing handicappers. But let's say they are experts in predicting which horse will win in a race. They got them together and they said, we do a study. Now, it is important to see the aspects of the study. They collected data about historical races, which means the outcome was known. They collected 88 data points about each horse in each race. But they told these experts that we will pick up a race. You can ask for any 5 data points about the horse that you think are relevant in projecting who will win about that race. So we will give you 5 data points out of those 88. So the experts did the first round where they took the 5 data points they thought was important about the horse and the jockey, and they made a prediction. And they were asked, how confident are you about this prediction? They said about 17%. When they measured the accuracy of these experts, it turned out to be 19%. So it's fair. They were 19% correct, and they were on an average 17% confident. So that matches very well. Now, in the second round, they were said, now you can choose 10 data points. In the third round, 20 data points. And in the fourth round, 40 data points you can choose of the information you need about the horse and the jockey to make your prediction. They made the predictions. They were asked, how confident are you? They put a number to that. Now, can you guess how their accuracy and confidence went? The accuracy, their predictive ability flatlined at 17%, but their confidence more than doubled. Beyond a point, the information that we collect becomes useless in improving our accuracy, but it just increases our confidence. And in the financial markets, this becomes extremely dangerous. When you are sure about something, when you're extremely confident about something, but your accuracy is low, which means actually that's not true, then you can lose a lot of money in investing. So rather than being obsessed with collecting information and ideas, beyond a point, information edge or just collecting information doesn't help. It is how you behave that helps. Now, a long story. Here we will visit a lot of Nobel Prize winners, hedge fund managers, academicians, mathematicians, scientists, and so on. So let me start this with a company called Long-Term Capital Management. During the late 90s, this was one of the best hedge funds. It had Nobel Prize winners who were doing arbitrage, basically, and creating a lot of wealth by leverage. A lot of Wall Street companies started copying them. Guys like Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch, they were copying them. The blue line here is the returns that this fund made in the initial part of their business. A little later, this happened. They lost so much money because none of their theories worked for a period of time. And in fact, people who copied them and had taken leverage to invest in the market also lost so much money. And mind you, there were Nobel Prize winners in this fund just doing arbitrage and lost so much money because the problem was they predicted that the markets will behave in a particular way all the time. And they went wrong. In fact, it was such a financial crisis during that time because so many companies and funds were affected that when Federal Reserve, the US central bank, wanted to take stock of the damage and they called all the bankers together, there were not even the number of leather chairs in the boardroom to get all these financial celebrities seated. A lot of chairmen of banks were sitting on foldable steel chairs. Now, let's move to the next story. We spoke about Harry Markowitz, who predicted who gave the theory of predicting the exact risk return of a particular security. A journalist asked Markowitz that, in your personal investment, how do you invest? So Markowitz said, well, I actually divide my investments 50-50 into equity and in bonds, in fixed income. Why? Because if I'm not invested in equity and equity market goes up, or I'm fully invested in equity and it falls, it will pain me. I'll regret it. This is the person who calculated the exact risk and return of an asset. Okay, look at how the personal investment is done. Now let's move to mathematicians. Isaac Newton, I think one of the best minds that we had, could calculate anything, right? He was also an investor. He invested in a company called South Sea. He invested and he made money in it. Then some of his friends and relatives told him, no, there is more money to be made. Why don't you continue? So he invested again near the top of the market and actually invested more money. And when the stock price collapsed, he lost a lot of his wealth in that. This is a chart I found from internet about his entry and exit points. You can see. Let's come to economists. How have economists done in stock market? So Irving Fisher, economist at Yale, one of the best considered economists in the world.
Nimesh ji, may I interrupt you?
Yes.
Your little volume up is required because we're not able to hear you very well. It's such an interesting talk. And it's so wonderful. Yeah, if you can do
Okay.
something about
Okay.
this. This is
Sure.
very good. Excellent. Excellent now.
Yeah, I think I would want to compliment him in his session. It's we just can keep on listening to all these stories. It's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll try to be loud and I'll try to keep the mic. I don't know. I'm using my son's laptop. So maybe the setting is something I don't understand here. Okay. So, so Irving Fisher, like, one of the greatest economists in the world, when he was speaking about stock market, he said stocks have now permanently reached a level where they will continue to go up. They will continue to enjoy high valuations. Unfortunately for him, he said this 3 days before the big crash of 1929. All right. In fact, Irving Fisher lost so much wealth. I've heard a story that while he was teaching in Yale, he lost so much money, he had to actually sell his house. And because Yale did not want one of their star professors to live in a rented house, they bought this house and actually gave it back to him to stay. What are these people getting wrong? They are fantastic minds in themselves, but what are these people getting wrong? George Soros, he puts it well in his book Alchemy of Finance, that if all angles of a triangle don't add up to 180 degrees, then any theory made based on that in geometry is useless. All these people thought that human beings are rational and created theories or trading strategies or investing strategies, assuming that economics and finance behaves like a science and you will get exact output for such and such input. And they lost a lot of money. Who got it right? Again, fundamental investors like Benjamin Graham. Again, I said, like in 1954, that book he wrote, Intelligent Investor. In the very introduction of that book, he writes that we shall talk quite a bit about the psychology of investors in this book. Because the primary problem or the investor's chief problem many a times turns out to be himself. And hence, discipline and behavior and temperament, psychology is more important in investing than any mathematical model or theory that you read. Now, I'll come to the idea. Now, if you want to do well in investments, what do people generally do? What is the source of alpha, as fund managers call it? Or how do you outperform? How do you do better than the others in investing? There are three sources. This is an interesting paper by Russell Fuller. He writes about these three advantages as an investor you can have. One, you can have an information edge where you try to collect the information about business, about the industry, about valuations, and then you start applying them. Well, you will do well, but you will do well along with the crowd, because getting an information that is better than what others have, earlier than what others have, consistently is very difficult. And it is becoming very costly also to get that information. I'm not talking about insider information. It is about studying businesses, because everybody is doing the same thing. The second is an analytical edge where you are information everybody has, but I analyze it in a better way. I have a best quant model or best analytical model. This also over time gets copied by people. The third edge is the behavioral edge. The behavioral edge is about that even if people have the same information and the same analytical model, how they react is different. And here you try to take advantage when the crowd overreacts to a new situation or it underreacts to a new information. And you also try to make yourself so disciplined that your behavior is superior to the others. You resist, say, greed, fear, regret. You resist these and make a better investor by following a certain discipline. I believe the behavioral edge is one of the strongest and the longest sustaining edge that one has in investing. I'll end with a picture of a Wall Street trader. This is Lehman Brothers. If you see the trader, if you see in the picture on the top left, is looking at 4 screens, getting all the information, looking at all the analytical models. By the way, this is a picture taken before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And on the other side, you find one of the richest investors in the world, Warren Buffett. He's sitting and having a burger in his office. In fact, in his office, there is a tray. I've given in a small clip below in the picture, a tray that has a words written on it, too hard. Something that he doesn't understand, he puts in that. If it is too complicated to understand, he doesn't want to invest in it. He puts it in that tray called too hard. So following simple discipline, having the right temperament, thinking longer term, using volatility as your friend, these are the well-known secrets, I would say, about being a successful investor. Now, maybe I'll stop here and Dr. Bhatnagar and Nehal, if there is any question, I can address those.
Nimesh, I would want to compliment you that in the 2 decades, I've heard a lot of fund managers and a lot of finance professionals giving, presentations on the topic of equity investing. But what this has really done is opened our minds as to how we are supposed to handle our temperaments in different situations. So it was really wonderful. And I think it was good that I attended your session today. And like we said, this is the first of the Financial Freedom series. We would want you to come back and, actually open our minds to new concepts and basically how should we handle our mindset in the different markets.